DreAllDay.com.
You are now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day, to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. That is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques all underneath the umbrella of one unified philosophy that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is, we're getting into a two-part mini-series. I'm going to tell you the biggest mistakes I have personally made in business. Before we get into this, I remind you of two things. First of all, my daily motivation and Monday motivation messages, guaranteed to have you focused, sharp, and on point to start your day or your week, respectively. Those, once we start sending them out again, you'll be getting them straight to your phone. If you're a member of my texting community, it's free to join. Text me at my number 305-384-6894. Secondly, Work on Your Game University. If you'd like to work with me directly, that is where my focus is on members of our university. These are people who are helping with their personal and professional development, whether you are building a business, you are growing your career, you're trying to figure out where you want to go, you want to get your mindset right, you want to step up your discipline, you want to be more accountable, you just want to be more systematic and strategic and consistent in your performance in life and or at work. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Link is down below in the description. Getting into the subject, biggest mistakes that I have made in business. And again, I had previously done a series called the Top 21 Entrepreneur Mistakes. Those are more speaking of mistakes that entrepreneurs make in general. That is starting in episode number 2797. This one is different because I'm going to talk about mistakes that I specifically have made myself, not just general mistakes that anyone can make, and not necessarily a mistake that you are making. These are just things that I have done, and I have found out later that they were mistakes. I will explain to you what those mistakes were or are, if I'm still making a mistake, or maybe in the process of fixing it, how they have negatively affected me, i.e. why it's a mistake, also what I'm doing to fix them, and what I personally need to keep in mind moving forward so that I'll continue to make them or I don't make these same mistakes again. Let's get into it. Point number one. Topic, once again, my biggest mistakes in business. These are not in any particular order, and as I said, this will be a two-part series. Number one, doing everything by myself. This is a big mistake in business, doing everything by yourself. For several reasons, this is a mistake. When you're first starting out in business as an entrepreneur specifically, we are often doing everything on our own because you're the one who started the venture. So it naturally makes sense you're doing everything on your own. Some of you may start with two people, like Apple computers started out in a garage, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, and many times just you by yourself. And we are often doing everything that needs to be done. That's the essence of entrepreneurship, because we see a way to solve a problem better or differently than what is already happening. So we are the brave and the bold ones who decide to go forward, putting ourselves on the line and taking risks in the process to begin these new ventures. And at the end, at the same time, there's a certain point when we're doing this in which any business or entrepreneur, there's a certain point to which, rather, any business or entrepreneur can grow while doing everything on our own. And we run into certain limits. We run into limits of time. We run into limits of energy. We run into limits of talent. We run into limits of knowledge. We run into limits of skill. There are only so many of these that any individual person has. And eventually your business cannot grow any further than what your elements have taken you. So wherever your elements take you, that's as far as your elements can possibly take you. And if you don't make changes, then your business is going to stop right there at that spot. Now, let's be clear. You may be able to build a business that will sustain you and sustain a lifestyle that you're comfortable with, doing everything by yourself and never bringing anyone else into the fray, never having anybody else do anything. You just do everything, and it's bringing you enough money, and you're happy and you're satisfied, you're content. That is fine. At the same time, most of the entrepreneurs I know are a bit more ambitious than that. And they understand that there's more they can do, more people they can serve, and serve them at a higher level if they were to bring some other people into the space. Now, maybe they have a fleeting thought of that. Maybe they are believing it. Maybe they're fighting against it. But at some point, you come to realize it. Whether you want to do something about it or not is a different story. So once we start to bump up against the ceiling of how far we can go on our own, we must transition to start bringing other people into the game who can take care of things either in our places, meaning we already were taking care of it, but somebody else is going to do it now. Or they can do it better than us, meaning we were doing it, but someone can do it at a higher level. Or do things that we weren't doing at all. Okay, I need this done. It's not happening at all in my business, but if somebody comes in, they can do it. Okay, great. Now we can do that. Let alone doing it better, they can do it, period, because it wasn't happening. And in my experience, many entrepreneurs take way too long to mentally transition into this frame of mind. I was one of those entrepreneurs. I took too long to transition into, hey, I need to bring other people in rather than me being the Superman who's doing everything on my own. Now, I spent a lot of time trying to do everything on my own. Not only trying, I was actually doing it. So I was moderately successful in doing so. And the trade-offs, again, were many. I mentioned a few of them earlier. One of them, I was using my time suboptimally because there are certain things that I'm great at and other things that I'm not so great at. But I was dividing my time amongst all of these things when instead what I should be doing is focusing on the things that I'm really, really good at, because that's where I create the highest return on investment. I wasn't focusing on the things that I did best because I had to do so many other things besides those things, those few things that I'm great at. I was doing way too many administrative tasks. And one of my skills is not being an administrator, but I was spending a lot of time being one because I had to do everything. A coach whose program I was in years ago called Alex Sharfin, he said, if you don't have an assistant, you are an assistant. And he was 100% correct. And it was through his program that I really came up with the framework. I taking a lot from him, came up with the framework for how to hire and train staff. And secondly, another issue, in addition to all the ones I listed earlier, I was not optimized in terms of revenue because, again, I was doing tasks that weren't really worth my time. I was doing administrative level tasks when I should have been doing high level producer level tasks. And I was doing both, but I wasn't putting enough effort and energy into the high level producing stuff because I had to do the administrative stuff. So I was, by opportunity cost, losing money every hour that I spent working on the wrong things. Because if I have a task that I'm really good at that's worth $1,000 an hour, but I had to spend time doing something that's worth $20 an hour, well, I'm losing $980 every hour I spend doing that $20 task, because I could be using that time to do the $1,000 task, but I can't because the $20 task has to be done and I don't have anybody to do it for me. So that was a mistake. Everybody understand the math there? And this is an ongoing issue for any entrepreneur, as a matter of fact. It doesn't ever end, because we can always be focusing more on our highest level opportunities and skill sets, and those are always evolving. So we could be constantly passing things off. So even if I go and hire 5 people right now today, and they're great at these things that they're going to do, that doesn't mean that I'm done hiring, because as I start to do my work now, that I can focus on fewer things now, I'm going to realize, oh, you know what? I can hand off some other things, or maybe things change in business. Maybe I decide I don't want to do that anymore, so I can drop this person or the job that they're doing. Now I want to do this over here, and now I need someone to do this job instead of that job. So things are always evolving. You're always looking for more, as they say, who's in your business instead of the how's in your business. A how is you trying to figure out, how do I do a thing, where a who means who can do a thing. And who's mean bringing people in. How means you adding on to your own skill set or hoping that you have a skill. That's a suboptimal way to do business, because you don't want to try to make yourself professional level at a skill at this point. You want to focus on what you are professional level at and then pass off everything else to someone who is already professional level. This is where the synergy comes in. Instead of you adding more skills, which takes time, how about you focus on the skills you already have, the ones that are already paying you? Those are the ones you need to focus on and continually pass things off. So this is actually never a completely solved problem if you understand the way I frame this. Another issue with this is, as you learn more about what's out there and what's available to you and who is available to you, you come to realize, as I have, that there are much easier ways to get certain things done than you doing them all by yourself. You just realize, oh, damn, I've been doing this all by myself, but I could use this or this person and get that done much faster, much easier, and maybe even better than me. So the lesson to be drawn from this is that you want to be passing work off to others as quickly as possible, with the added bonus that these days, sometimes the others you're passing stuff off to can be a software or a program, which is generally cheaper than a human. So you always want to be doing this, but this is one of the mistakes that I made in business, trying to do everything on my own. Point number 2. Today's topic, again, is part 1 of our 2-part series, biggest mistakes I've made in business. Number 2, dealing with less than ideal people in my pursuit of revenue. And when I say dealing with less than ideal people, what I mean is selling my products and services, specifically services, because I really don't care who buys a product. Because if you buy a product from me, I don't have to actually communicate with you. But if I sell you a service, like if I'm a personal trainer, I have to talk to you to serve you. If I'm a coach, I have to talk to you to coach you. So dealing with less than ideal people on the client side, service side, in pursuit of money. In other words, taking someone on as a member or a client simply because they were offering me money and they could afford to offer me money, when instead what I should have done is turn them away because they were a less than ideal person, regardless of how much money they were offering. This is a mistake in business. So I'm referring to people who, again, you're selling your stuff to, and not every client and customer is created equal. And any of you who's been in business for 3 years or longer, you already know this. Not every client, not every customer is created equal, even when they are offering you the same amount of money. If you have been in business for long enough, you very well understand that some people are not even worth the money that they are willing to pay you, even when they are indeed willing to pay you. So even though we run businesses for the purpose of making money that we can use for other things, just because someone is offering you money does not necessarily mean that you should take it. All right, there are some money that is not worth taking. This is especially important when you're in a position where you feel as if you need the money. So let's just say you're strapped for cash. You need $500 by the end of the month, and here's someone willing to offer you $3,000. You know they're a less than ideal person, but you want that money, so you take the money, and you end up regretting taking the money, even though it got you what you needed in the moment. In the long run, it costs more than it was worth. That's what usually ends up happening. I've had this happen many times, and hopefully I never make the mistake ever again. So to get the money that you need, you deal with a less than ideal person in order to get it. A bad idea. So now this sounds like an easy decision when we're talking about it. But again, when you're in a position of need, or at least you feel like you're in a position of need, and that money is being offered to you, you may overrule your logic and your rational thinking and accept someone who you should not accept because your emotions say, hey, get that money. Now, I know, as I said, I have made this mistake in the past. I made this mistake more than once, and I'm continually on watch to make sure I do not repeat this mistake. This is one that is not an ongoing issue. This should not keep happening. This is something that should never happen again once you figure it out. Because making this mistake, taking money from someone who you shouldn't take money from, even though they want to give it to you, this is not only a time-consuming mistake, it's also an energy-consuming mistake and an attention-consuming mistake. When you're in a service-based business, meaning you had to give a service to a person, you need to be very careful and very, very specific about vetting the people from whom you're going to take money, because you have to work with these people. You got to talk to this person. Do you really want to deal with this individual? Yes or no? If the answer is no, let them go. Send them somewhere else. Sell them a product maybe where you don't have to deal with them on a personal basis, or send them somewhere else where they can spend their money elsewhere, but don't take their money. This can be, again, it's not worth it, because every minute you spend dealing with a less than ideal client who you should have never dealt with in the first place, and then the things you need to do to get rid of them, all those things make the money irrelevant. All right, the money doesn't even pay for all the time you had to spend getting rid of this person or having to deal with them because they paid you. And you don't want to do this. You don't want to be in this situation. So when you get to the right mentality, this is the key here for this point right here. You need to be of the mentality that you are the buyer. In other words, I got a whole episode coming on this concept, be the buyer. Even when you're selling something, you want to have the mentality of the buyer, because a buyer is of the mentality that they are the one with the money, so they're picking who they're going to buy from. Even when you're selling, you need to put yourself in this frame of mind that, yes, even though I'm the one receiving the money, I'm still choosing who's going to get to pay me. It's not that everybody who wants to pay me can pay me. It's the people who I want to pay me will pay me, and not everyone gets chosen. And again, if you've ever made the mistake of taking on a less than ideal person in pursuit of money, you've understood that the costs far outweigh the benefits. And if you haven't gone through this yet, ideally, you can keep it that way. Moving on to point number 3. Today's topic, once again, this is part 1 of our 2-part mini-series, biggest mistakes I've made in business. Number 3, not using credit enough, not fully utilizing credit. Now, for a long time, personally, I was not a big user of credit. It had never been explained to me as a youth. I probably had a similar experience to you, that when I was 17 or 18 years old, I started getting credit cards in the mail out of nowhere and for no reason from companies who I had never contacted ever in my life. I took the credit cards, activated them, used them, ran up bills, and didn't even know how to pay them. I had that happen. Maybe some of you have had that experience. But credit was never explained to me. Nobody ever told me how it worked. My parents did the best job they could with what they knew and what they had, but they did not have a financial education. They didn't have financial literacy, so I had to learn that myself later on in life. And because of this, for a long time, I was never a big user of credit. I didn't understand credit. I didn't know the value of using credit, and therefore I paid for everything basically in cash. I still pay for stuff in cash these days, but will use credit as well. And what happened is, the more that I met other entrepreneurs who were playing the game at a higher level than me, I was perplexed. I was like, how are y'all finding all these people with all this cash, and how do you happen to have all this cash on hand? This is what I'm thinking in my head. But as I got to know more people and got to talk to them more and see what they were doing, the more I started understanding, oh, these people are not using cash. They're using credit. They're able to do all these things so easily because they're using credit. They're able to sell things to people because they're allowing people to use credit to buy from them, rather than just requiring everybody to have cash, because not everybody always has cash. But people can have credit even when they don't have cash. And I realized that this was good for me on the side of the entrepreneur as far as putting my business together. I also realized it was valuable for me on the side of being a salesperson and giving people the opportunity to buy from me, even if they didn't have cash on hand. It gave more opportunities for everybody to help each other. So it was a win-win-win all around. It's even a win for the companies that give the cards because you got to pay them back. So the more I started to understand how using credit, again, creates leverage in business, and it opens up many possibilities that otherwise had not been opened to me or would have been extremely limited for me had I not used the credit. So once I understood it, I started using it a lot more. And there's probably a lot more that I can learn about how it can be used, because I know people who are using it even more than I'm using it even to this day. Some people may hear this and think that using credit or getting others to use credit to work with you or for you is a risk. I will concur that yes, it is a risk. Using credit is a risk. But remember the definition of an entrepreneur. It's a person who starts or runs a business venture while taking on greater than normal financial risk. That is the definition of being an entrepreneur, is that you're taking on risk. You can't be an entrepreneur without risk. It's not possible. So if you are not taking a financial risk, I don't know what you're doing, but it ain't entrepreneurship. So credit is a risk for all involved, because the company that gives you the credit, if Visa gives you a credit card, they are risking that you might not pay them back and you're not going to get their money back. You are taking a risk because if you don't pay it back, then it reflects poorly on you, and you still got to pay the money back, and you may need to pay more than you borrowed because the interest and all that stuff. There is risk all around, but as you know, with no risk, there is no reward. Everybody understands that concept, right? So in my experience, the more I have used credit, as long as I'm using it wisely and professionally and smartly, of course, the more opportunities open up, the more possibilities become available, and the more things can happen now instead of happening later. That's the good thing about having access to resources, that you can do things now instead of delaying and having to wait to do things later. That's the great thing about credit, because it's basically giving you resources that you don't tangibly have, but you have access to resources now, and it puts you in a position to where you can get to having those tangible things. So you do need to have some kind of process or strategy for, okay, now I've used credit to get to this opportunity. Now what do I do to actually make this thing work? So assuming that you're an entrepreneur and you have the stomach to deal with risk, I'm assuming that that's who you are, because that's who I'm talking to here today. I would suggest that you look into, learn more about, and start leveraging more credit if you are not already. Because if you're not, then you're probably leaving some opportunities for yourself on the table that you could be using, especially as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. As long as you have a business entity, your business entity is documented, then you can get credit as a business rather than even getting credit as an individual person, because that'll give you basically a whole other, basically life, let's just say, when it comes to getting credit, a whole different score and all those other things. I'm not no expert on this thing. As I said, there are things that I'm still learning about it, but the opportunities, they're very big. I know people who work in credit, and things that they showed me and the things that they tell me, I say, okay, I wish I had known about that 10 years ago. I would have did a whole lot of other things a lot faster than I did do them, or have done them, period. Had I known about that being available, I could have taken advantage of that 10 years ago. So this is one of the things that, again, this is an ongoing thing with me, because there's always more to learn when it comes to literacy, dealing with finance, credit, etc. I still believe there's a lot for me to learn myself. That said, let's recap today's class, which is the biggest mistakes I made in business. Again, it's going to be a two-part mini-series specifically about mistakes that I personally have made. Number one, doing everything by myself. This is something I find a lot of entrepreneurs take way too long to get over this hump. I felt like I took too long. It didn't take me that long. I think within my first 2 full years of being a full-time entrepreneur, I started bringing people on. I had this mindset from the beginning. And if you want to be what they call a quote unquote real entrepreneur and really run a business rather than just being a practitioner running a small business, which is maybe you doing everything and doing damn near everything, but you want to run a business to where the business may one day somehow have the structure to run without you, then you got to start thinking like an entrepreneur, which means having an entity that can run without you being there. Now, it doesn't mean that it has to be like that tomorrow, but you have to be putting the structure in place and thinking about what pieces would need to be in place for this situation to work without me having to do everything. Point number two, dealing with less than ideal people in pursuit of money. Again, this is when your emotions start talking more than your logic. You have to be very careful of this, because it will happen in business, especially when money is being dangled in front of you. Most of you as entrepreneurs, you probably know you may need to take that money, but there are times when it's not worth it. Number three, not using credit enough. Credit opens up a lot of avenues of opportunities for an entrepreneur that are not available to you if you are only using your cash available, because if you combine the cash available and having credit, then you have more possibilities. You can do more. You can invest in more stuff. You can hire more staff. You can get certain services. You can get equipment. You can do a whole lot of things that you might not be able to do with just cash alone. And there are things you could do even if you don't have any cash at all, if you have access to credit. So credit is another asset that you can use. Robert Allen talked about this in his book, Creating Wealth. There are 4 types of There are 4 types of tangible assets. There is cash, there is a steady source of income, there's owning some type of real estate, and the 4th one is credit. Credit is one of those assets. And if you have it, then it gives you the opportunity to do stuff that you couldn't do if you didn't have it. So tomorrow we'll go into part 2 of this series, Work on Your Game University. If you want to avoid these mistakes or avoid any mistakes, or not any mistakes, but avoid a whole lot of mistakes, let's just say, that many entrepreneurs make when they're doing everything on their own and you don't know what you don't know, come to Work on Your Game University and you have someone who is seasoned, someone who's been experienced, someone who's been through this stuff. I've documented all of it. You get access to all of that and access to me as a coach, as a member of the university. Just go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre, all